So we're going to be doing David Hockney. And there's the guy is a genius as far as I'm concerned at this point. I must admit, I started out with my reservations about David Hockney, and he has totally won me over by the end of my research. Um, this is a touring show. It actually was at the National Gallery in London, I believe, and now it's at the Morgan Library. Um, Hockney was born in 1937, and he is one of the most preeminent artists of England at this stage of the game. Um, this show features over 100 drawings. Uh, a lot of it is focusing on portraiture. So in my talk, I will focus in on a few of his people. Um, uh, Celia Birtwell, um, the artist's mother, and Maurice Payne, and then self-portraits. Um, I am also going to be pulling in things about his paintings into this conversation, because they're really important to how to think about this guy. So his approach to drawing is like his approach to his entire career. It's very diverse. He uses all kinds of things: pencil, pen and ink, etching, photo collage, iPhone and iPad drawings. At this point, he's technically just trying all kinds of stuff, along with traditional printmaking. He also uses crayons, for crying out loud, in his drawings. So the focus in the drawings, these some of them are preparatory sketches for larger scale paintings, but for the most part, I think he uses drawing as a way to explore his ideas and to get them out. So I'm going to go to here, and this is David Hockney in the studio. This is a photographic drawing printed on 7 sheets of paper mounted on these gigantic sheets of what's called Diebold. It's actually just a support. And this piece is 9 feet by 25 feet. This is not actually him standing in his studio. This is a piece of art. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, you can see how it's a little bit funky. You know, the chairs look a little odd. Let me see if I can do the zoom in here so you can see some stuff. So you can see this photograph was kind of photoshopped in there, and then underneath the chairs, you can see the shadow. These shadows have been painted in basically an iPad or in Photoshop, however he did it. So I wanted to show you this piece because it gives you a survey of some recent work. A lot of this stuff was 2017. You get an idea of what his studio looks like and kind of where we're going. So let me see. All right. So he started young. these pieces are, you know, he was 16, 17 years old when he did these two pieces. 1954, this collage on newsprint. He was probably 16 or 17 when he did it. Pretty interesting work for 1954. So the self-portraits Hockney made in his teenage, such as the present one and the pencil drawings that we're going to go to, convey youthful confidence as well as the beginnings of an intense self-scrutiny. The full frontal pose and attention to detail in clothes and styling reflect Hockney's burgeoning sense of his own identity. The collage offers a foretaste of Hockney's later work, notably his vibrant palette and experimentation with different media. So he was very inventive, even at this young age. Terrific draftsman. The guy could draw, even as a young guy. Now, he went to Bradford School of Art, which is, you know, Bradford, England. It's northern England, someplace. I don't know the exact area. I don't know England that well. And then he studied at the Royal Academy after that. So this is it's in Yorkshire. And then the Royal Academy, actually, he met Celia Birdwell, who became a lifelong friend. And, well, you're going to see plenty of her. So My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, this is an etching series that he did called The Rake's Progress or something like that. I can't remember now. But he had a thing. He thought America sounded like a good place for him to be. And this etching on the right, his first etching, Myself and My Heroes, is Walt Whitman and Mahatma Gandhi, and David Hockney. So, you know, these are very well done, interesting, intriguing, kind of, you know, and the piece on the left has this, you know, sense of, you know, I want to get to America. So his respect for Picasso is something which we're going to come back to again and again throughout this presentation. The idea of the draftsmanship, the invention, the diversity of approaches is something which he emulated out of Picasso. And, you know, this is, you know, David Hockney as Picasso's nude model. The homoerotic element of Hockney's work in the 60s and in the early 70s was really big. It was very cutting edge at the time. I'm not going to spend a heck of a lot of time on it because right now, those images don't seem so outlandish. There's other things which he has moved on to, which are really of much greater interest, I think. But the lure of America was definitely there at an early age. Okay, and now we are in LA. He got himself a studio and basically he spent, I'd say 40 years in LA. He still has two studios in LA and a studio in England. Um, okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Clark and Percy. Okay, his sense of humor is really playful, and the business of scale is very important. This is 7 by 10 feet. This is a big piece. These early pieces in the early 70s were very slow. He worked on them for well over a year. Beautifully done. Um, they're acrylic. This is no mean feat to pull something like this off and have it still be fresh. And his color sensibility is just really subtle and um, basically uh, they categorized him as a pop artist, though I'm not, so sure about that at this stage of the game. Looking at his work, he was friends with Andy Warhol. He knew all the guys, but you know. Now, the other thing I want to draw your attention to in this painting is the lady and the gent. They actually, this is Celia Birtwell, who is a lifelong friend. She was his confidant. She is a fabric designer, and Ozzie Clark, who is the fellow on the right, is a fashion designer. They were very close friends. And I want to draw your attention to Celia because she is going to be one of the recurring themes of this presentation. He drew her over the next 50 years. So one of the interesting parts about this show is his focus on, or how they gathered together images from particular sitters, and you can actually see them age through the drawings, which is rather interesting. Okay, and this is Christopher Isherwood and Don Bockley. I'm botching that name. Forget it. But they were also, Christopher Isherwood is a writer, as I'm sure many of you know. And this piece, again, this is 84 by 120 inches. The image below is a man standing in front of the painting, so you get a sense of the scale of this piece. Scale is very important to these pieces, and actually throughout his work. I'd say that David Hockney's scale, he moves back and forth between mediums. He also did set designs. All of this is very large scale. Let's see. Okay, and this one's a fairly well-known piece. It's again big. There's a whole series of these swimming pool pieces, which I'm sure many of you have seen. And this is one of the earlier ones that he did. Again, this color, really fresh, really bright, buoyant, California, light-filled. And one thing that I found really interesting about this piece is, look at the size of the head on the guy that's standing at the end of the pool. Uh, it took me a while. I was looking at the painting for a while and I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And uh, I'm I'm really not clear about what the motivation was for enlarging the head on this character, aside from to pull that face out of the picture towards us and give a sort of sense of looking down into the pool. So we're above him and looking down into the pool. So if you measure the size of that head and you measure the size of the feet, the head is so much bigger than the feet. So, and then the guy inside the pool, you know, so we're at the vantage point of being above looking down. And now here's another bigger splash, 1967. So this is actually before the piece that I just showed you. If you're at all familiar with what was going on in the art world at that time, you know, this is a very pop sort of image. It's also, there were these guys called the minimalist painters that were going on at that point, and this is kind of Hockney's take on minimalism. The other thing that he said about this piece was, what he found really funny about this piece was the splash, which is something which happens for an instant and is gone, took him 2 weeks to paint. So anyway.
Larry?
Yes.
Somebody's curious. Can you explain why he used such large canvases? Is there any reason for that size?
Yes, absolutely. The scale of these pieces is monumental, and the impact of them, it's like a stage. It's a performance. It really, the impact of being in the presence of one of these gigantic pieces is where, you know, what he was after. So that's about as well as I can explain it. But if you see one of them, and I've seen some of these large scale pieces. I've seen some larger scale pieces than the ones that we've seen here, and the impact is you're in the painting. Okay, and here's a study for my parents and myself. This is colored. The one on the left is colored pencil. Hockney was living in Paris at that time, and he was, you know, visited by his parents, and he did this preparatory drawing of them. His father worked as a clerk, but was an amateur artist himself, so he encouraged, you know, David, and he was an anti-smoking campaigner and a vegetarian, strong political views. His mother was quite strong, quite a strong matriarchal figure, and if you look in the mirror, you see David's little face looking out at us in both. The one on the right is the painting that was done from it, which is quite large, also. One of the things about Hockney is he smokes like a fiend and still does, and is a carnivore. So,
Sylvia. Larry, 2 questions.
Yes.
Any comment? Would you comment on Hockney's unusual compositions? That's one.
Well, you know, they are out of the notion of the modernist notion, and I'm going to go into this in a lot more depth, but the modernist notion that a painting is something unique, and that you can put into a painting many things which cannot be contained in a photograph. Notice the drapes above and behind his parents in this painting. It's a stage. This is a performance. This guy is always out there. He's creating this stage, this set. Okay, so yes, they are very unique croppings and interesting vantage points and points of view.
Somebody else said, my parents and myself almost looks like a Saul Steinberg cartoon. Was he
Yeah,
influenced?
I understand that there is this sense of daffy sense of humor that's always there in Hockney. He's always fooling around.
Yeah, someone else commented that he looks like his father. His figures seem to be floating.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to move on to some of the drawings that are actually in this show, and these are drawings of his mother, and the one on the left is from Paris, so it was obviously 1972 or 73 when he did that drawing. The interesting part about this is you see the color that's in this thing? It's actually crayon. So he used some really interesting mediums, shall we say. And the piece on the right. Now, again, look at the stylistic differences between these two pieces. You know, he's always approaching these things with a different technique, if not a different style altogether. Let's see. There's also this piece on the right, the the one where she's like looking straight at us. There's a vulnerability in that drawing. It's really, he really gets something. He gets in there. Really well done. Okay. And we're going to get to this multiple point of view thing. And I'm going to go into a lot of depth on this because it's definitely worth spending some time on. So let me see what my timing is like. And okay. This is on the left, a Picasso from 1910, his dealer, Ambrose Villard. And on the right, we have this Polaroid composite photo that he was experimenting with. Now, the reason I brought up Cubism, the reason I brought up the notion of different points of view is this is something which is essential to modernism, actually. If you look at Cézanne, he is constantly changing his point of view on a still life, on a landscape. He's combining those things in one composition. And what the Cubists did was pick up on that signal from Cézanne and follow it out and create this shallow space of multiple points of view, and basically compressed together. So you can see that these photographs are taken from really different points of view on his mother, and then they're combined together into this really amazing composition. We're going to move on. And we're going to go
Let-
into more depth in this. Go ahead.
There's a question that maybe you could answer first.
Sure.
You were talking about the humor in one's artwork. One of the people mentioned, I was told to not use humor in one's artwork because people will not accept you as a serious artist. What is your view on that?
I don't know who those people are, but don't listen to them.
That says it all.
Yeah. Okay. So, The Secret Knowledge. This is a book that David Hockney put together. Actually, it was published in 2001, but he did all this research on the use of lenses, mirrors, and various types of apparatus that he felt artists were using from the early Renaissance dating around 1430. And there are several different things that I've got at the bottom of this page. One is a Camera Obscura. I think some of you may have heard of that. Basically what it is it's a lens with a mirror, and your drawing paper goes on top of that, and you actually trace the image onto that piece of paper through that. There's various apparatuses that were used, lenses, mirrors, from the early part of the 1400s on. His thesis is that perspective and three-dimensionality, which came into Western art, came out of those technical innovation, the technical innovation of the photographic apparatus, let's put it that way. And this point of view is borne out by some material from the time. Some artists were definitely using these kind of primitive camera-like machines or lenses. It's disputed by a lot of historians, and in fact, I know plenty of really tight, wonderful realist painters who would never use a camera for anything. But by the same token, there are many artists who have used the camera, who have used the Camera Obscura, who have used it to great advantage. I truly do believe that some of the greatest artists have used them, and it does not negate anything about the technical achievement of what they did. A Vermeer is a Vermeer. The mark making, the poetry, the quality of those paintings is not diminished one bit by having used photographic references and things like that. In my opinion, though we know so little about Vermeer, nothing can be proved about that. I feel that there is some evidence in his work, and there's Caravaggio with a lot of foreshortening and all of that. What these lenses do is make it possible to see the big shapes of what's sitting in front of you. Those early lenses and mirrors and prisms and things like that were rather primitive. So you wouldn't get a really high quality image. You would see the shapes, and you would be able to use that to create a composition. So, what's this got to do with the Hill of Beans? Uh, again, what the idea is in the 1830s, 1839, as a matter of fact, when the camera became a real thing and daguerreotypes were starting to be done and all of that, the freedom from being chained to try and do a realistic image was abolished. Basically, it freed artists to be awkward again, to fumble around, to be expressive, more or less. So if the Impressionists, the Expressionists, the Cubists, Cézanne, modernism, completely, it is totally a choice as to how much realism you integrate into your work at that point, because you can take a photograph and you'll get a likeness. Now, the argument is that our experience of reality is something more than just a fixed image, that we're constantly moving our heads. We have two eyes, we have ears, we're seeing and feeling and experiencing things when we are looking at someone and when we're looking at something. So there is more to our experience of being in the presence of someone than just that flat image. So we will move on to why is he doing these drawings? If all of that is true, it really is getting to know this person. One of the things that he said, this 1970 Celia, he did it with a rapidograph. So basically, that's a very fine nib pen, and basically, there's a certain level of speed that you have to travel at to make that pen work right, and it kind of restricts what you can do. And he liked that. He liked the challenge of it. The piece on the left from 71 is, again, crayon. And here she is again in 1972 and 1973. Look at the elegance of these drawings. I mean, basically, this is, he looked at Ang, and basically one of the things that he started to really discover, even back at this point, was the sense of drawing as a way of knowing this thing. Okay, and here she is in 1979. And again, his sense of humor, no one can take him for not being serious. The guy is an explorer. He is tenacious, but he's also, they're really fun. They're really buoyant. It's just this how can I put this? It's more like a novel, getting to know Celia throughout his lifetime. And here she is, 2019, crayon drawing. And this is one of the composite photos. Now, again, with the composite photos, what he's doing is he's look at how close he is to her. You've used one of those Polaroids, or if you haven't, you need to get really close in to get those kinds of shots. So he's really like very close to her to get these different fragmented pieces. And he's moving around her. She's staying still and he's moving around her, and just taking all these different points of view and putting them together. It's a very interesting, intriguing way of approaching this. And there's a whole thing about time, about compressing time, about sequencing. You know, she was sitting still. It probably took him, you know, probably a half an hour to do this thing. It looks like she's sitting still, and maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was moving around, but, you know, it's a very intriguing thing. Okay. And now we're going to move on to Maurice. Maurice is a lithographer, and he works with Hockney, and as far as I know, he's still with us. So this is a very early piece, 1976, and then 1998. Look at the approaches. Look at the difference in the approaches. You know, this 1998 piece is very Van Gogh-like. I mean, that the quality of that spiky hair and the mark making in that face, that those jagged jabs, and the way of articulating it with those short stabs of the pen. And here we go. 2000, charcoal drawing. And 2008, a very early digital drawn piece. So basically he was using a stylus to draw on I don't know if in 2008 they had iPads, but he definitely drew this on screen to create this piece. And he's doing a lot more of that now. And again, 2012. And 2013. And you can see the aging process in these drawings, which is pretty remarkable. I mean, they did a really great job at putting this show together, 100 drawings. So we go from 1976. And now, self-portraits. Okay, so this, you saw a couple of early ones from his student days. This self-portrait on the left is from 73. Again, using these very different approaches. He's you know, this very spare line drawing in the 1973, and then in 1980, you know, he's using multiple mirrors to do this side view of himself, because you can't stare very easily at yourself in profile. So that ubiquitous cigarette. And these, you know, they're both from 1983, both from around the same time, but very different approaches. Okay. Self-portrait, 1999. He is pretty deaf at this stage of the game. So here he is making fun of himself. Hey, what you say? And then the other one is this Picassoid character, man looking for his glasses. Well, guess whose glasses those are? And here we go. Speak of the devil, Picasso. You know, this kind of multi-dimensional, directional thing on this one self-portrait, and then the set of self-portraits that are, you know, they're different angles on the same portrait, and the glasses. He's such a prankster. They're so funny, but they're also saying something about our perception, about how we see, about the directionality of things, about, you know, that's what's going on. It's playful, and at the same time it's saying something about our perception, about the timing of things, about how we see and what we assume. And then there's Celia, crayon drawing, straight out of Picasso. And here is Pear Blossom Highway. Now, this is an interesting piece, and I'm gonna take a few minutes to talk about this one. You know, basically, this is the Polaroid, and this is 1986. So he's been working with this Polaroid concept since around 1980, I think it was, or the late 70s. Now, this looks like, well, it's pretty straightforward, and yet, what's going on here? So he's going up and down off of a ladder to get these shots. You know, the stop ahead, he's up on a ladder taking that shot. How would you see that from that point of view? How would you be able to see that? The stop sign, he has to do that from up on the top of the ladder. Otherwise, you'd be looking up at it. And he's got it looking straight forward. Okay, look at the cactus. You know, basically, it's multiple points of view that he's piecing together in that. So it's a really interesting thing going on here. You know, he's playing around with time, he's playing around with space. He's asking questions about all this stuff.
Larry, there's a
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
The sky here looks like a blue version of gold foil patches for the background in a Japanese screen.
Yeah, very much. You know, he actually talks a lot about the spaces in Japanese paintings, in Chinese paintings, which are very flat. And one of the things that he is doing is saying, these are Polaroids. These are all Polaroid shots of the sky pieced together to make this thing. But it's a flat surface.
What size is it?
I don't know on this one. I'm sorry about that, but I can guarantee you that it's fairly substantial in size.
I also just want to remind everyone, only put your questions into the chat function. We don't use raised hands.
Okay. And here is...
Oh, wait, I have a little bit more.
Okay, go ahead.
She said, I think the sky is a comment about the water and brings the water to two-dimensional.
Well, it's interesting, since that was the desert that he was taking shots of, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that's a way to interpret what's going on up there. This is the Grand Canyon, and one of these wonderful photo collage pieces, and you can see, you know, basically he's shifting around and taking these shots from all these different angles, and what that leads him to is this, which is an enormous painting. This is a monumental scale. It's 30 feet across. It's almost 8 feet tall. It is made up of 60 canvases. Okay, each of these increments is a canvas. So they interact in a very different way. It really is, you know, something that he came at this out of the experience with the Polaroid, and I mean, for me, it's a masterpiece. It really is just beautiful color, very intriguing, very interesting approach to representation. And, you know, although it does have kind of naturalistic aspects to it, it's also an invention. You can, you know, the color, of course, is marvelous in the Grand Canyon, but I don't think you're going to get that magenta out there. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I have been there. So,
Larry, there's one other comment.
Sure.
There is a study of this at the Hudson River Museum currently.
Uh-huh. Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
Somebody just said that.
Okay.
Hudson River right in Yonkers.
Uh-huh. So one of the things that he was and is after is compression of experience. So he's like the Chinese scroll paintings, okay? You scan your way across this thing and you're experiencing it in very different ways as you move through the painting. So one of the ideas is actually, you know, to view it from a scan point of view. And that's one of the other things that he's after with this kind of scale, where if you're in the presence of this painting, your eye is going to be moving all over the place. You're going to be trying to take in all these different things in different areas of the painting. Okay, and here is, this is a different version. Actually, he's done, I don't know how many different versions he's done, but I've seen at least 4 or 5 different versions. And so, you know, basically this gives you some idea of the scale of the piece with the person standing in front of it. And as I was talking about the Chinese paintings, where there's kind of a narrative, there's a story going on, there's moving through the painting, and there's different experiences in these different locations. And that's something that Hockney is after in his pieces. He's after you're experiencing this thing in different ways, in different areas, and seeing it from different points of view. You know, I mean, there's no Western perspective in here. There are very limited shadows. There's very, if you look at those fields that are off in the distance, they actually are in reverse perspective, where as they go off in the distance, they're wider rather than narrower, which is what normal Western perspective is about. Now, again, one of the things that the historians have to say about his whole theory about the camera obscura changing Western art is that basically not all artists use the camera obscura, not all artists use the camera, but there was a convention that was created in after the 13th century that had to do with the vanishing point and had to do with with the laws of 2-point perspective and all of that. And what he's saying is that is not the only way to see. And here is one of his wonderful pieces that he's been doing since around the 2000s, where he's actually going out into nature and painting these paintings. So each one of these panels is 48 by or 36 by 48. And here's the man out in the woods painting one of these paintings. So he actually goes out there. He's got a crew that gets him out there and sets him up, but he actually goes out and paints these paintings in this area in the north of England, near where his studio is. And he paints fairly quickly. He wants to get down really fresh marks. It's a long way from those early paintings. Remember that painting of the Clarks, the painting of the pool, where he took a year to paint those paintings. These paintings, he knocks them in. He basically gets them sketched in 1 or 2 days. The entire piece, and then he'll take it back and he'll work it in the studio to some degree, but he's trying to keep the marks really fresh. He's trying to keep it alive. He's trying to keep it, really that immediacy of experience is something that he's trying to capture in the pieces. And it harkens to Van Gogh. The mark making, the freshness of the mark making, that immediacy. Van Gogh would paint 2 of these paintings in a day, and they were roasters. I mean, he would knock these things in. So it's something that I think Hockney really wanted to get. He wanted that freshness. And here we have one of those big pieces. It's 48 height, 96 width. This is the loopy business going out of his studio and into the countryside. There's these wacky patchwork fields off in the distance that, yes and no. Do they have a regular perspective that you and I would relate to as far as Western perspective? Not so much. Very zany, very different. He's compressing it and doing different, taking different shots and different points of view and merging them together in the canvas. And here we are with a whole group of the iPad self-portraits. These are printed out. They are about 27 by 37 or something like that, or maybe they're a little bit smaller in width. I think maybe they're 22 by 30 or 36. But his draftsmanship is marvelous, and he is exploring this new medium. It's incredible. The guy is just, he's constantly working. And here we are. Here's Celia, 2019. Remember that young girl that we saw in the early pictures? And there's a self-portrait with that stogie stuck in his mouth, that cigarette. Um, they're you know, I actually ordered myself a pad after looking at these drawings. I'm just like, I got to try this. Um, okay, so there's a number of things out there. The Art of Seeing with David Hockney, that's a really a decent YouTube, and you can get that. And then there are actually the Secret Knowledge was a BBC two-part series. Both of them are available on YouTube. And if you're interested, I mean, it's fun, and it's really, he did this book, but these kind of walk you through the concepts that he's playing around with. So that is
That's it?
that's it.
Right. We don't have any other questions, Larry. So, and also it's it's almost 5 after.
Yep.
So wait,
Okay.
just thank yous again. And people have been asking when we're going to see your work, and I about it.
Well, we'll get around to it.
Okay, so thank you all for coming. Thank you, Larry.
Next week,
questions. Oh, right.
Next week we're doing Frankenthaler, Helen Frankenthaler. So it's definitely worth tuning into.
Okay, well, thank you all for your questions, and thank you all for coming, and have a good weekend. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.